tear gas, protesters throwing stones, a situation that appears to be spiralling out of control.
Undeterred by security forces, participants of Venezuela's resurgent insurrection movement flood the streets of Caracas. It's the first time protesters have demonstrated against Nicolas Maduro's government in months, and they're in it for the long haul. They insist they'll continue protesting until the Venezuelan leader gives up his hold on power.
Venezuela, a country with the world's largest proven oil reserves, yet its citizens face one of the worst economic crises in modern history. How did a nation so rich in resources end up in such turmoil? Its streets echo with the unrest of its people, facing dire shortages and unprecedented inflation, leading to widespread protests and riots. Amidst this chaos, a contentious presidential crisis unfolds, shaking the foundations of its democracy, but one must wonder, what comes next in the story of Venezuela? Well, stay tuned, as in today's video, we will look into what is happening in Venezuela.
Por eso Venezuela anuncia todo su respaldo al presidente Vladimir Putin en la defensa de la paz de Rusia.
Now, before I move on to the next part, please make sure to hit the like and subscribe button, as I've got many more videos like this on the way. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy the video. To understand how Venezuela got into this position, we need to go back in history to the early 20th century. Venezuela's economy has been heavily reliant on oil since the early 20th century. This reliance helped create its political and economic landscape, setting the stage for the challenges it faces today. As the century progressed, Venezuela experienced a roller coaster of political and economic changes. The mid-20th century was marked by military dictatorships, but a significant shift occurred in 1958 with the fall of Marcos Pérez Jiménez and the rise of civilian governance under figures like Rómulo Betancourt.
It is said Amerigo Vespucci named the north coast of South America Venezuela, Little Venice, because of the houses on stilts he found there. The first Europeans came to Venezuela seeking gold. They later found black gold, crude oil. They've been mining it ever since.
The oil boom of the 1970s, underlined by the nationalization of the oil and steel industries, saw Venezuela's currency soar against the US dollar, making Venezuela the richest country in Latin America. However, this prosperity was short-lived. By the late 1980s, economic depression led to severe austerity measures under President Carlos Andrés Pérez, sparking widespread riots and social unrest.
Foreign oil companies operate the wells. They pay the state royalties on their production, about $100 million a month. Only the wealthy few can afford luxury apartment houses. The extremes of wealth and poverty in Caracas are great. Still, the city is a magnet for the country people. One reason is welfare. Part of the oil royalties support the welfare system, so no one need go hungry. There's growing unrest in the universities. Many students are convinced that foreign investors, notably the oil companies, are taking more from Venezuela than they should. These students call for the nationalization of oil production. Also, they say that not enough Venezuelans hold top positions.
The early 1990s were turbulent, marked by two failed coup attempts by Colonel Hugo Chavez and the eventual impeachment of President Pérez. These events reflected a growing disenchantment with the established political order, paving the way for the rise of Chavez and his Bolivarian revolution in 1998.
Now, on February 4th, 1992, the Venezuelan people witnessed a military rebellion led by Hugo Chavez that brought back hope in the country's future after dark years for the popular classes. The impact of Chavez's uprising 30 years after the event is brought to you by Leonel Retomal in a series of stories.
Under Chavez, Venezuela embarked on a path of socialist and populist policies fueled by high oil prices and an increasingly anti-US foreign policy. Chavez's presidency saw significant changes including land and wealth redistribution and a new constitution. However, these changes were not without controversy, leading to a failed coup in 2002 and increasing tensions within the country. Despite these challenges, Chavez remained popular among many Venezuelans, especially the poor, due to his focus on social programs. The death of Chavez in 2013 and the subsequent election of Nicolás Maduro marked the beginning of a new era, but one plagued by continued economic hardship and political strife.
Capriles, yo te dije, y lo dije públicamente, si yo pierdo por un voto te entrego mañana, pero no es así, he ganado por casi 300,000 votos, es la decisión del pueblo. No queremos violencia, llamamos a la paz, al respeto, a la tolerancia, al respeto a las instituciones. ¡Que viva Hugo Chávez! ¡Chávez vive!
The decline in oil prices, coupled with economic mismanagement, led to hyperinflation, shortages of basic goods, and a mass exodus of Venezuelans fleeing the country. By 2019, the political situation reached a new crisis point with the emergence of opposition leader Juan Guaido, who declared himself interim president, challenging Maduro's legitimacy and leading to a standoff that garnered international attention and divided global powers. So, what's next for Venezuela? It's a story of a nation rich in resources yet struggling to find its footing in a rapidly changing world. Venezuela's journey from an oil-fueled dream to a cautionary tale of economic collapse is a reminder of how quickly fortunes can change in the global political landscape. But the real question remains, can Venezuela rewrite its story, or is it destined to be defined by its turbulent past? The answer might shape not just the future of a country, but also the dynamics of a global power and economics.
The hope is that the future holds more jobs, better living standards, better homes. It will need to, since Venezuela's population is growing very rapidly.
Imagine a country sitting atop the world's largest oil reserves yet struggling with crippling economic hardships. Welcome to Venezuela, a land of stark contrasts and paradoxes. This is a story not just about natural wealth, but also about how overdependence on a single commodity can shape a nation's fate. Venezuela's journey is a roller coaster of economic highs and lows, driven by its black gold, oil. But this isn't just about the ups and downs of the oil market, it's a deeper tale of governance, economic strategies, and how a nation's fortune is tied to a volatile global commodity. But here's the catch. When oil prices soared, Venezuela thrived, but when they plummeted, the economy spiraled. The boom and bust cycle was exacerbated by policies that lacked diversification, putting all economic eggs in one basket. The result? Hyperinflation, shortages, and a stark reality that contradicts Venezuela's oil-rich potential. But there is more to this economic saga. It's a narrative of choices in governance and economic policy that have steered the country into uncharted waters. Mismanagement and political upheaval have not just been setbacks, they've reshaped Venezuela's economic landscape, leaving citizens to navigate a reality far removed from its oil-rich problems. In this oil-fueled drama, Venezuela's citizens are the ones who feel the impact the most. The nation's streets, once bustling with the promise of prosperity, now often echo with the discontent of those struggling to meet basic needs. This dichotomy between resource wealth and everyday hardship raises profound questions about the distribution of wealth and the role of government in managing a country's natural bounty. Venezuela is a classic example of the resource curse, a phenomenon where countries rich in natural resources like oil often experience less economic growth and stability than those with fewer resources. This situation highlights the paradoxical nature of the resource curse, where abundant natural wealth coexists with significant developmental and governance issues.
The Inter-American Press Association and other press freedom groups have denounced Venezuelan police for using force, intimidation, and repression against journalists while they were covering recent demonstrations at the Colombia-Venezuela border.
In Venezuela, the quest for truth and transparency in media is as vital and challenging as the nation's pursuit of economic stability. The state of media and the freedom of speech in Venezuela isn't just a subplot, it's a central thread that weaves through the fabric of its society. The governmental grip on media outlets and the curtailment of free speech have not only drawn international scrutiny, but also raised questions about the true nature of democracy in Venezuela.
The Committee to Protect Journalists also released an advisory warning international and local journalists of potential physical harm, as well as detention and prosecution by authorities. Both organizations say the attacks against journalists and attempts at censorship took place when trucks with U.S. humanitarian aid were trying to enter Venezuela. The aid was requested by opposition leader Juan Guaidó, who has been recognized as Venezuela's interim president by the U.S. and a host of other nations.
The battle for narrative control in Venezuela is as intense as any political struggle. It's a war of words and perceptions where government-imposed limitations have muzzled opposition voices, leaving a void filled with propaganda and one-sided stories. This tug-of-war over information shapes not just the domestic politics, but also how the world perceives Venezuela's complex reality. But what does media freedom really mean in a country whirled by economic and political crises? In Venezuela, independent journalism isn't just a profession, it's an act of defiance, a so-called beacon of truth in an ocean of misinformation. Journalists, bloggers, and ordinary citizens risk their safety to bring stories to light, challenging the narrative set by those in power. In the streets of Caracas, the struggle for media freedom is palpable. It's seen in the shuttered newspapers' offices and the radio stations that have fallen silent. Yet it's also witnessed in the underground networks of information where news circulate through whispers and clandestine broadcasts. Looking forward, the question remains, can Venezuela rekindle the flame of free speech and free press? The answer to this may well determine the path the country takes, towards openness and reform, or further down the road of restriction and control. The future of Venezuela's democracy may hinge on its ability to let diverse voices be heard and respected.
Media censorship has risen to new heights in Venezuela, with a record number of radio stations closed, even as the Venezuelan Journalists Association, CNP, documented marginally fewer physical attacks in the past 12 months.
There is a policy of censorship, prosecution of the media. Although it is true that physical aggression against journalists decreased, we saw an increase in radio station closures from 4 in 2021 to 104 in 2022.
The state communications regulator cited licensing breaches for many of the closures, and lawmakers in 2022 denied the action was related to the broadcaster's content. But Carlos Correa, director of the free expression nonprofit Espacio Público, says the moves appear to be part of a policy to limit independent media.
Now looking elsewhere, the US says it'll conduct joint military flight drills within Guyana as tensions rise with neighboring Venezuela over territorial claims. Washington says the exercises are routine, but reiterated what it called its unwavering support for Guyana's sovereignty. Venezuela has described the drills as a provocation. Last weekend, it held a referendum aimed at reaffirming its territorial claim to the oil-rich Essequibo region.
Venezuela today is on the brink, with its political and social landscape deeply unsettled. The intense conflict between President Maduro's government and various opposition groups is more than just politics. It highlights the deep divisions within the country, showing how deeply these issues affect the daily lives of Venezuelans. This situation is key in understanding Venezuela's struggle to find stability and a clear path in a rapidly changing and challenging world. Poverty isn't just a statistic in Venezuela, it's a palpable reality with unemployment on the rise all across the country. These are not mere challenges, they are profound indicators of a nation searching for its path to stability and prosperity. The political unrest in Venezuela is felt everywhere, from the busy streets of Caracas to quiet homes. The ongoing standoff between President Maduro's government and opposition groups has become more than just a fight for power. It's caused widespread uncertainty that affects all parts of life, from buying daily essentials to family life at home.
Now to Venezuela, where people are voting in a controversial referendum that the government hopes will strengthen its claim over a territory in neighbouring Guyana. The non-binding vote aims to measure popular support for Venezuela's historical claim over Essequibo, and it comes after the UN's top court ordered Caracas to take no action that would alter Guyana's control over the territory. Essequibo is 160,000 square kilometres, about the size of Greece, and makes up about 2/3 of Guyana's landmass. Gas and oil were discovered there in 2015.
Tonight, tensions rising between two neighboring South American countries as Venezuela threatens to annex more than half of the country of Guyana.
This is a direct threat to Guyana's territorial integrity, sovereignty and political independence.
As a century-old dispute is reignited over an oil-rich territory known as the Essequibo region, a stretch of land that in the 1840s, an international tribunal of arbitration decided it belonged to Guyana. But Venezuela has always disputed that decision.
More recently, on the topic of the current political climate, Venezuela laid claim on the Essequibo region, which belongs to Guyana. This conflict has historical roots and has recently escalated due to significant economic and geopolitical factors. This territorial dispute dates back to the 19th century, with the region being awarded to British Guiana, what is now Guyana, in an 1899 arbitration decision, a ruling that Venezuela has long contested. The Essequibo region, which makes up a large portion of Guyana's territory, is significant to Venezuela due to its vast natural resources, including gold, copper, and crucially substantial offshore oil reserves discovered in recent years. Venezuela's renewed claim over the Essequibo region can be seen as a response to its acute economic crisis, deepened by a decline in its own oil production and hyperinflation. The US has decided to intervene and started conducting flights over Guyana in the midst of this rising conflict. However, with Guyana being a Chinese ally and Venezuela becoming more and more friendly with China, this conflict is ever so complicated.
They were jumping for joy when President Nicolas Maduro was last in China 4 months ago. But today the leadership here is not excited about the prospect of Venezuela without him at the helm.
Amidst Venezuela's internal struggles, the role of foreign actors cannot be overlooked. International interests in Venezuela's vast oil reserves have long influenced the country's politics and economy. Major powers, including the United States, China, and Russia, have vested interests in the region. Their involvement adds another layer of complexity to Venezuela's already complicated situation. The presence and influence of these global players raise questions about the sovereignty and future direction of Venezuela. As international powers strive for influence, the Venezuelan people find themselves in the middle of a complex geopolitical puzzle. This external dimension adds another layer to the country's ongoing narrative, making the path to resolution even more complicated.
He, without providing evidence, accused the US, specifically National Security Advisor John Bolton, of plotting to overthrow him.
Hoy vengo otra vez.
Today I come out once again to denounce the plot set forth by the White House to destroy Venezuela's democracy, to assassinate me, and to impose a dictatorship in Venezuela. Mr. John Bolton has been assigned once again as the chief of a plot to fill Venezuela with violence and to seek a foreign military intervention, a coup.
The Venezuelan diaspora, stemming from the country's complex crisis, has become a significant global issue. The widespread migration of Venezuelans, often referred to as caminantes, the Spanish word for walkers, as they are often forced into walking across dangerous and hostile environments, such as the Darien, to find a better life elsewhere. This mass exodus is a matter of international concern, affecting countries far beyond Venezuela's borders. As these individuals seek new beginnings elsewhere, they embody the hopes and hardships of a nation in flux, highlighting the personal dimensions of political and economic instability.
This amateur video shows hundreds of Venezuelan migrants being driven out of a Brazilian border town and back into their country as locals cheer. Angry residents of Pacaraima set fire to a migrant camp on Saturday after a local restaurant owner was robbed and stabbed, allegedly by Venezuelans. Shots were fired, stores were shattered, and debris littered the streets.
Venezuela is currently going through one of the worst crises in the world, whether it is the economic struggles, the presidential crisis, or the mass exodus of its people. What does the future hold for Venezuela? I guess we'll have to wait and see. Thank you for watching the video until the end. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like and subscribe to my channel, as I've got many more videos like this on the way, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.